Hello, my name is Michelle Ortiz-Claus, junior student at Florida International University, and this criminal justice reform presentation is for the Senior Seminar in Psychology course for the spring 2019 term. The topic of this presentation is regarding wrongful deaths of capital punishment and the need to minimize the errors and mistakes that lead to these, as well as wrongful convictions and imprisonment due to flaws in the United States judicial system. In Chapter 17 of the book Forensic and Legal Psychology, Psychological Science Applied to Law, authors Mark Costanzo and Daniel Kraus discuss the worthiness of studying how many death verdict cases are overturned and why they're overturned. They outline the top three causes as number 1, incompetent defense lawyers, number 2, faulty or misleading jury instructions, and number 3, several forms of prosecutorial misconduct, such as suppression of evidence or intimidation of witnesses. In the peer review article titled Taking Stock of Innocence, Movements, Mountains, and Wrongful Convictions, James Acker provides further proof of the importance of this reform because the risk of the execution of innocent persons figures prominently in policy debates about capital punishment. In the same article, he informs that the Death Penalty Information Center has identified 156 former death row inmates who were exonerated between 1973 and 2015, which represent approximately 1.8% of a total of 8,588 individuals sentenced to death in the United States during that time period. Authors Costanzo and Kraus sustain these facts, and that 68% of trials ending with capital punishment and sentencing have been reversed. Once a case has been found worthy of reinvestigation to exonerate, it takes about 10 or more years between conviction and exoneration in capital cases. Some of the numerous capital convictions and death sentences that have been vacated on procedural grounds did involve innocent defendants. In relation to this information, it is important to know that once an inmate is executed, all appeals cease. The failures of injustice that lead to wrongful executions ironically become legal murder. No one is prosecuted for the mistake, and no information could be found regarding any compensation for the families of the innocently executed after the fact. Sadly enough, there is plenty of evidence provided by the Innocence Project website that speaks of the little to no monetary compensation of those exonerated. According to authors Costanzo and Kraus, DNA is the main tool used that proves the innocence of the wrongfully convicted. This in itself is supported as reported by information found in the Innocence Project website when in 2017, 20 cases were investigated by them and were overturned as DNA was used to find the correct perpetrators. Too late for some. The online article titled 8 People Who Were Executed and Later Found Innocent names Cameron Todd Willingham, Ruben Cantu, Carlos de Luna, David Wade Spence, David Tafiro, Thomas Griffin, Meeks Griffin, and Larry Griffin. The Innocence Project website reports specific reforms that have been enacted to help prevent and correct wrongful convictions that can lead to death row executions. Reforms legislated have been forensic and science reform to improve steps for proper handling of DNA evidence from the start of the chain of custody to the laboratory process. Next, improving the oversight and enforcement of innocent protections established under the Justice for All Act of 2004. Efforts of reinforcing recommendations by the National Institute of Justice for better defense practice, excusable evidence, eyewitness identification, false confessions, police misconduct, weak prosecution evidence, and systematic failures. In place, there is also the endeavor for increasing the federal to state initiatives to promote innocence reforms under the Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant Program to support technological advancements for local law enforcement to achieve innocent-related reforms. As mentioned, these changes have been implemented, but it is a national system-wide overhaul that is still in its early stages. And as author James Acker aptly states, quote, "Much more remains to learn and to do. Mountains must be moved to keep the innocence movement moving forward." Thank you.